In a crumbling Victorian house in Portland, a successful software engineer was about to face the ultimate family betrayal. What started as settling her mother's estate took a shocking turn when she encountered her sister's calculated deception. Mia Rodriguez wasn't your typical grieving daughter. For 16 years, she had built walls between herself and her complicated family, known for her methodical problem-solving. When Elena smugly declared the house belonged to her, Mia had no idea she was walking into a legal battlefield. Her decision to fight back would lead to a bitter inheritance war, exposing decades of buried resentment. What began as cruel manipulation would become a devastating family reckoning. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The rain had turned to a fine mist by the time Mia Rodriguez pulled her rental car up to the familiar Victorian house on Elm Street. 3 weeks had passed since the funeral. 3 weeks since she'd last seen this place that had haunted her dreams for 16 years. The burgundy paint was peeling now, she noticed, and the wraparound porch sagged slightly on the left side. But it was still unmistakably home, even if it had never truly felt like one. She sat in the driver's seat for a moment, her hands gripping the steering wheel as memories crashed over her. Carmen's voice echoing from the kitchen. "Mia, you're too selfish, just like your father." The sound of doors slamming. Her own 17-year-old voice screaming back, "I hate you, and I hate this house." The irony wasn't lost on her that she was here now to collect the keys to that same house. The house Carmen had left her in the will. The house that represented everything complicated about their relationship, but also the only tangible piece of her mother she had left. Mia climbed the front steps, fishing in her purse for the spare key she remembered being hidden under the loose board on the porch. Her fingers found only empty space. Frowning, she tried the front door. Locked. The new deadbolt gleamed silver against the old oak door. Definitely not original to the house. Looking for something? Mia spun around to find Elena leaning against the porch railing, a coffee mug in her hand and that familiar smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. Her younger sister looked different. Thinner, sharper somehow, with dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. But her stance was pure confidence, as if she belonged here and Mia was the intruder. "Elena." Mia's voice came out steadier than she felt. "I didn't expect to find you here. Where else would I be?" Elena's tone was light, conversational, but there was steel underneath. "This is my home." Something cold settled in Mia's stomach. "Your home?" "Elena, I know we need to discuss the arrangements for selling the house, but..." "Selling?" Elena's laugh was sharp, brittle. "Oh, Mia, you always were the one who assumed things would go your way." She took a slow sip of her coffee, letting the silence stretch. "Pack your bags, Hermana. This house is mine now." The words hit Mia like a physical blow. "What are you talking about?" "Mom left the house to me. I have a copy of the will." Elena reached into her back pocket and pulled out a folded document, waving it like a flag of victory. "Funny thing about wills. Sometimes people change their minds." Her smile widened, especially when they realized which daughter actually stuck around to take care of them. Mia's hands trembled as she reached for the papers. The legal language swam before her eyes, but the key phrases jumped out with brutal clarity. "I, Carmen Rodriguez, being of sound mind and body, to my beloved daughter Elena Rodriguez, I leave my house at 847 Elm Street. Witnessed this day. This can't be right." Mia's voice cracked. "She wouldn't have. When was this dated?" 6 months before she died." Elena's voice softened slightly, but her eyes remained hard. "Right around the time you missed her birthday. Again." The memory hit like a slap. Carmen's voicemail from October, her voice frail and hopeful. "Mija, I'm making my famous tres leche cake today. I know you're busy, but maybe you could call me?" Mia had meant to call back. Had intended to. But David had gotten food poisoning that weekend. And then there was the deadline for the Peterson project, and by the time she remembered, it felt too late. Too awkward. Like every other attempt at reconciliation over the past 16 years. Mom was sick, Mia said quietly. She wasn't thinking clearly. She was perfectly clear. Elena's voice turned sharp again. Clear about which daughter was there for her doctor's appointments. Which daughter helped her with groceries when her arthritis got bad? Which daughter held her hand in the hospital while the other one was too busy with her perfect Seattle life to even visit? Each word was a carefully aimed dart, finding its mark in the guilt that had been eating at Mia since the day David had answered their landline. They still had a landline, because Carmen had never trusted cell phones, and heard Elena's tear-choked voice. She's gone, Mia. She's gone, and you weren't here. I flew down the moment I heard. For the funeral. How generous of you. Elena set down her coffee mug with a sharp clink. But she didn't die at her funeral, Mia. She died alone, in a hospital bed, asking for you. The words hung in the air between them, like smoke. Mia felt 16 again, standing in this same spot, her mother's disappointed face watching from the window as she loaded her suitcase into her friend's car. You'll be back, Carmen had said. Family always comes back. But Mia hadn't come back. Not really. Not until it was too late. Elena, listen. Mia's voice was thick with unshed tears. I know I wasn't. I know I should have been here more. But Mom and I, we had our problems. You know that. It doesn't mean I didn't love her. For a moment, Elena's mask slipped, and Mia caught a glimpse of something raw and broken underneath. The little sister who used to crawl into her bed during thunderstorms. Who used to beg Mia to braid her hair before school. Who had cried when Mia left for college, and then again when she moved to Seattle for work. Love isn't enough, Elena said quietly. It never was. With Mom, she needed presence. She needed sacrifice. She needed someone to choose her, and you never did. So you forged a will? The accusation flew out before Mia could stop it. Elena's expression went cold again, the vulnerable moment snapping shut like a steel trap. I didn't forge anything. This is Mom's will, legally witnessed and filed with the county. If you have a problem with it, take it up with a lawyer. She walked toward the front door, then paused. Oh, and Mia? I changed the locks. You might want to find a hotel. The door closed with a soft click that felt like a funeral bell. Mia stood alone on the porch, the mist turning to actual rain again, soaking through her blazer and chilling her to the bone. She looked up at the second-story window that had been her childhood bedroom. Elena's silhouette moved across the glass, straightening curtains, making herself at home. The drive to the nearest hotel passed in a blur of stop signs and traffic lights that all looked the same through her tears. The Comfort Inn on Powell Boulevard was standard-issue beige and anonymous, nothing like the rich colors and old-world charm of the house she'd just been exiled from. Her hands shook as she dialed David's number. Hey, babe. His voice was warm, familiar, the sound of safety in a world that had suddenly tilted sideways. How did it go? Did you and Elena work out the logistics for... She's stolen the house. The words came out in a rush. David, she has some will that says Mom left everything to her, and I don't know what to do, and I think I'm going to be sick. Whoa, slow down. She could hear him moving, probably stepping away from whatever stack of papers he'd been grading. David taught AP history at Roosevelt High, and even in crisis, he approached problems with the methodical patience of someone who'd spent years breaking down complex concepts for teenagers. What do you mean, stolen? Mia found herself telling him everything. Elena's cold confidence, the will she'd produced, the changed locks, the cruel accuracy of her accusations. David listened without interrupting, making soft sounds of sympathy at the right moments. Mia, honey, he said when she finished. I'm sorry. I know how much that house means to you. Did he, though? Mia wondered. David came from one of those fairy tale families where parents and children actually liked each other, where holidays were genuinely joyful instead of carefully negotiated ceasefires, where home meant warmth and belonging instead of a battlefield disguised as love. It's not about the house, she said, though even as she spoke the words, she knew they weren't entirely true. It's about... God, David, what if Elena's right? What if I was a terrible daughter? What if Mom really did hate me at the end? Your mother didn't hate you. David's voice was firm, You had a complicated relationship, but that's not the same thing. And even if she did change the will, even if she was hurt and angry, that doesn't mean you deserve to lose everything that's rightfully yours. But maybe it is rightfully Elena's. The admission felt like swallowing glass. Maybe she earned it by staying. By being there. Maybe? David's honesty was one of the things she loved about him, even when it hurt. But that doesn't make what she's doing right. If your mother wanted to leave Elena the house, she could have done it honestly. She could have talked to you about it. Mia closed her eyes, remembering the funeral. She and Elena had sat in the front pew at St. Mary's, close enough to touch, but maintaining careful distance. They'd greeted the mourners with polite smiles, had stood side by side as Carmen's casket was lowered into the ground beside their father's grave. But they hadn't really spoken, not about anything that mattered. Even then, Elena had known about the will, had known that Mia was grieving a house she'd already lost, had said nothing while Mia talked about selling it, about using the money to maybe finally start the family she and David had been putting off. I should have tried harder, Mia whispered into the phone. With Mom, with Elena, with all of it. Mia, listen to me. David's voice carried the gentle authority he used with his most fragile students. You can't undo the past 16 years in a single conversation. But you can decide what you're going to do now. Do you want to fight this? Did she? The house was a money pit, she knew that. The foundation needed work, the electrical system was probably a fire hazard, and the plumbing made sounds like a dying whale. It would cost more to renovate than it would ever be worth, on the market. But it was also the kitchen where Carmen had taught her to make empanadas, flour in their hair and laughter echoing off the tile walls. It was the reading nook where she'd hidden during her parents' fights, losing herself in books while their voices rose and fell in the rooms below. It was the place where, despite everything, she'd once felt like she belonged to something larger than herself. Yes, she said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. I want to fight. Then we fight. David's words were simple, matter of fact. I'll start looking into estate lawyers first thing tomorrow. We'll figure this out, Mia. We always do. After they hung up, Mia sat on the hotel bed and stared at her reflection in the mirror across the room. She looked small, deflated, like a balloon 3 days after a birthday party. But underneath the grief and shock, she could feel something else taking shape, something that felt suspiciously like determination. Elena wanted a war? Fine, she could have one. But as Mia finally drifted off to sleep in the too-soft hotel bed, she couldn't shake the image of her sister's face when she'd mentioned their mother dying alone. The brief crack in Elena's armor that had revealed something desperate and damaged underneath. Whatever came next, Mia had the sinking feeling that they were both going to lose more than just a house before it was over. The morning light streaming through the hotel curtains felt harsh against Mia's swollen eyes. She'd barely slept, her mind cycling through Elena's words and the impossible reality of the document her sister had produced. By 8 a.m., she was already dressed and nursing her second cup of bitter hotel coffee, a list of estate attorneys open on her laptop screen. James Morrison's office occupied the third floor of a restored brick building in the Pearl District, the kind of place that whispered competence without shouting about it. Mia arrived 15 minutes early, her hands steady now that she had a plan of action. The receptionist, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, offered her coffee and a sympathetic smile that suggested she'd seen plenty of family disputes walk through these doors. Mrs. Rodriguez? The voice belonged to a man in his early 40s, tall and lean with graying temples that made him look distinguished rather than old. James Morrison extended his hand with the practiced warmth of someone who understood that his clients were usually meeting him during the worst moments of their lives. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. His office was lined with law books and framed degrees, but what caught Mia's attention was the small photo on his desk, a young boy with a gap-toothed grin, maybe 8 or 9 years old. Your son? She asked, settling into the leather chair across from his desk. My nephew, actually. James's expression softened. But I raised him after my sister died. Family law isn't just professional for me. It's personal. Something about his tone, matter-of-fact but tinged with old grief, made Mia's walls come down a fraction. She found herself telling him everything. Elena's smugness, the will, the changed locks, even the guilt that had been eating at her since Carmen's death. James listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair and studied the documents Elena had given her. "Tell me about your relationship with your mother," he said finally. The question hit like a physical blow. "We were complicated." "Complicated how?" Mia's throat tightened. "She wanted me to be someone I wasn't. Traditional, obedient, someone who'd marry young and give her grandchildren and never leave Portland." The words came faster now, 16 years of resentment spilling out. "I was 17 when I realized I'd rather fight with her every day than pretend to be the daughter she wanted. So I left for college and never really came back." "And Elena?" "Elena was perfect." The admission tasted bitter. "She stayed close, took care of Mom when she got sick, never challenged anything." Mia paused, remembering something that had been bothering her. But Elena had problems too. Addiction issues in her 20s. Mom bailed her out more than once. Financially, emotionally. I always thought Elena was the favorite, because she needed more help. James made another note. "When was the last time you spoke to your mother?" "Christmas. A 5-minute phone call where we both pretended everything was fine." Mia's voice cracked. "She died 3 weeks later." "And you flew down for the funeral?" "Of course I did." The defensive edge in her voice surprised even her. "I'm not a monster, Mr. Morrison. I loved my mother, even if we couldn't figure out how to show it to each other." James's expression gentled. "I don't think you're a monster, Mrs. Rodriguez. I think you're a woman who's been carrying guilt that doesn't entirely belong to you." He set the documents aside. "Can you tell me about your mother's mental state in her final months? Any signs of confusion, medication that might have affected her judgment?" Mia tried to remember. Elena mentioned she was having trouble with her arthritis, and the neighbors said she'd become more isolated after Dad died. But confused? "I don't know. We didn't talk enough for me to notice." The admission hung heavy in the air. James studied her face for a long moment before speaking. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I need to ask you directly. Do you believe your sister forged this will?" The question she'd been avoiding crystallized into sharp focus. Elena's confidence. The timing. The way she'd produced the document like she'd been waiting for exactly this moment. "Yes," Mia said quietly. "Yes, I think she did." James nodded slowly. "There are some irregularities that concern me. The witness signatures look rushed, and the language doesn't match the style of your mother's original will. But proving forgery requires evidence, not just suspicion." "What kind of evidence?" "Handwriting analysis, financial records showing unusual activity, witness testimony." James leaned forward. "Mrs. Rodriguez, are you prepared for what this kind of investigation might uncover? Family disputes have a way of revealing secrets that people would rather keep buried." Mia thought about Elena's face yesterday, the mask of confidence hiding something desperate and raw. About her mother's final months, alone in that big house with only Elena for company. About the 16 years of careful distance she'd maintained, telling herself it was self-preservation when maybe it had just been cowardice. "I need to know the truth," she said finally. "Whatever it is." James made a note on his pad. "Then we'll start with the basics. I'll need copies of your mother's medical records, financial statements, anything that might give us insight into her mental state when this will was allegedly signed. And I'll want to interview the witnesses." "How long will this take?" "Weeks, potentially months if it goes to court." James's voice carried a warning. "And Mrs. Rodriguez? This won't be easy on your family. Or what's left of it." Mia thought about David's voice on the phone last night, steady and supportive but carrying an undercurrent of worry. About the life they'd built in Seattle, carefully constructed and peacefully predictable. About the baby they'd been trying for, The future they'd planned that didn't include bitter legal battles with the family she'd spent 16 years trying to escape. But she also thought about Elena's smirk, the casual cruelty in her voice as she delivered the killing blow. About Carmen's voice on that last voicemail, hopeful and fragile, and ultimately ignored. "Mr. Morrison," she said, meeting his eyes, "I want you to understand something. This isn't about the money, or even really about the house. This is about my mother's last wishes, and whether Elena had the right to steal them from both of us." James studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then we'll find out what really happened in those final months. But Mrs. Rodriguez, sometimes the truth isn't what we expect it to be. Are you prepared for that possibility?" Mia thought about her sister's face when she'd mentioned their mother dying alone, the brief crack in her armor that had revealed something broken and desperate underneath. "I have to be," she said quietly. As she left James's office with a retainer agreement and a list of documents to gather, Mia felt the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders. Whatever came next would change everything. Her relationship with Elena, her marriage, her understanding of her own family's history. But for the first time since Carmen's death, she felt like she was finally moving towards something instead of running away from it. The investigation began 3 days later with a visit to Mrs. Patricia Dalton, the elderly neighbor who had lived next door to the Rodriguez family for 40 years. James had suggested starting with the people who knew Carmen best in her final months, and Mrs. Dalton's name had appeared on several of Carmen's emergency contact forms. Mia stood on the familiar porch at 845 Elm Street, noting how well-maintained Mrs. Dalton's house looked compared to her mother's crumbling Victorian next door. The same rose bushes still lined the walkway, though they were smaller now, more carefully pruned. Through the lace curtains, she could see movement. Someone approaching the door with measured steps. "Mia Rodriguez," Mrs. Dalton said as she opened the door, her voice carrying the particular tone of someone who had been expecting this conversation for weeks. "I wondered when you'd come to see me." At 78, Patricia Dalton remained sharp-eyed and straight-backed, her silver hair pulled into the same neat bun Mia remembered from childhood. She wore a cardigan despite the mild Portland weather, and her living room smelled of lavender and old books. "Mrs. Dalton, thank you for seeing me." Mia settled into the offered chair, James beside her with his legal pad. "I know this is difficult, but we're trying to understand what happened with my mother's will." Mrs. Dalton's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Your mother was a complicated woman, dear, especially toward the end." "What do you mean by that?" The older woman was quiet for a long moment, her fingers working at the fabric of her sweater. "Carmen was troubled in those final months, anxious. She'd call me at odd hours, worried about things that didn't make much sense. Bills she thought she'd forgotten to pay, people she was convinced were watching the house." James leaned forward. "Did she seem confused? Disoriented?" "Not confused, exactly, but paranoid. And so very alone." Mrs. Dalton's voice softened with what sounded like genuine regret. "Elena was there, of course, but Carmen always seemed to be waiting for someone else. Watching the street like she expected. Well, like she expected you to come home, Mia." The words hit like a physical blow. Mia felt James's eyes on her, but she couldn't meet his gaze. "Did she talk about changing her will?" "No." The answer came quickly, too quickly. Mrs. Dalton's hands stilled on her sweater. "But I did see something odd. About a week after the funeral, Elena was in the backyard, burning papers in that old fire barrel your father used to use for yard waste." James made a note. "What kind of papers?" "I couldn't tell from my kitchen window, but there were quite a few of them, and Elena seemed urgent about it, like she didn't want anyone to see." Mrs. Dalton paused, studying Mia's face. "I thought it was strange timing, you understand. Most people are still too grief-stricken to think about cleaning out papers so soon after a death." Mia's pulse quickened. "Did you see anything else unusual? Any visitors to the house?" "Well, there was that lawyer fellow. Came by twice in Carmen's final month, always when Elena was there. Thin man, nervous-looking. Drove an old sedan that needed work on the muffler. You could hear him coming from blocks away. James exchanged a look with Mia. Elena's lawyer, most likely. Did you happen to catch his name? No, but I remember thinking he didn't look like the type of lawyer your mother would normally hire. Carmen always believed in doing things properly, professionally. This man looked like he worked out of a strip mall. After they left Mrs. Dalton's house, James drove them to the county courthouse to examine Carmen's financial records. What they found painted a picture of a woman under increasing stress. In the months before her death, Carmen had sold several pieces of jewelry, liquidated a small savings account, and taken out a loan against the house that Mia hadn't known existed. She was hemorrhaging money, James said, reviewing the bank statements. Medical bills, mostly, but also some unusual cash withdrawals. Large amounts, always in round numbers. How large? 2,000 here, 1,500 there. Over 6 months, it adds up to nearly $20,000 in cash. James frowned at the papers. Did your mother typically deal in cash for large purchases? Mia shook her head. Carmen had been old-fashioned in many ways, but she'd always been meticulous about record-keeping, paying bills by check, keeping receipts. She used to say that cash was for people who had something to hide. They spent the afternoon gathering Carmen's medical records, a process that revealed another troubling pattern. In her final 6 months, Carmen had been prescribed increasing doses of anxiety medication and sleep aids. Her primary care physician's notes mentioned increased agitation and paranoid ideation, along with, quote, concerns about family relationships and financial security. This paints a picture of someone under significant psychological distress, James said as they sat in his car outside the medical building. But it doesn't necessarily indicate cognitive impairment. If anything, it suggests she was acutely aware of her problems. Mia stared out the window at the familiar Portland skyline, gray clouds gathering for another evening rain. James, what if Elena was right? What if Mom really did want to leave her the house? Then why the cash withdrawals? Why the strange lawyer visits? Why burn papers after the funeral? James's voice was gentle but firm. Mrs. Rodriguez, I've seen legitimate will changes, and I've seen forged ones. Legitimate changes come with explanations. Conversations with family members, sometimes reconciliation attempts. What we're seeing here looks more like coercion. The word hung heavy between them. Coercion. The idea that Elena might have manipulated their dying mother into changing her will was almost too awful to contemplate. But it would explain the paranoia, the anxiety, the mysterious cash withdrawals. We need to find that lawyer, Mia said quietly. They drove to Elena's apartment complex next, a rundown building in southeast Portland that Mia remembered from her mother's worried phone calls years ago. Elena's living in that terrible place again, Carmen had said. I keep telling her she can come home, but she's too proud. Now, apparently Elena had gone home. But the building manager confirmed that Elena had lived there until 3 months ago, when she'd moved out suddenly, leaving no forwarding address. Paid her final month in cash, the manager said, a tired-looking woman in her 50s who seemed unsurprised by their questions. Elena always paid in cash. Said her job didn't do direct deposit. What job was that? James asked. The woman shrugged. Something with construction. Her boyfriend Tommy worked the same crew, I think. Nice enough guy. Seemed worried about her toward the end. Kept asking if she was okay, if she needed anything. Tommy Nguyen. Mia remembered Elena mentioning him at the funeral. Briefly, awkwardly, like she wasn't sure she wanted to claim him in front of the relatives who'd come to pay their respects. As they drove back toward downtown, Mia's phone buzzed with a text from David. How's the investigation going? Missing you. Made your favorite pasta tonight. Wish you were here to share it. The message felt like a lifeline to her real life, the carefully constructed world she'd built in Seattle, where problems had solutions and families were functional. But it also felt impossibly distant, like something from another person's life. James, she said as they stopped at a red light, what happens if we prove Elena forged the will? Does she go to jail? Forgery is a felony in Oregon. So is fraud. If she coerced your mother or manipulated her while she was vulnerable. James paused, choosing his words carefully. The criminal charges would be separate from the civil matter of the inheritance. But yes, she could face significant jail time. Mia thought about Elena's face yesterday, the brief moment when her mask had slipped and revealed something broken and desperate underneath. Her little sister, who used to follow her around like a shadow, who used to cry when Mia left for college. And if we don't prove it, then she keeps the house, and you'll always wonder what really happened in those final months. James pulled into the parking garage beneath his building. Mrs. Rodriguez, I need you to understand something. We're not just investigating a forged will anymore. We're investigating what might have been elder abuse, and that changes everything. As Mia walked back to her hotel through the evening drizzle, she realized that somewhere in the space of a single afternoon, this had stopped being about inheritance and started being about justice. The question was whether she was strong enough to see it through, regardless of what it might cost her family. Behind her, the lights of Elena's stolen house glowed warmly in the gathering dusk, and Mia wondered if her sister was sleeping peacefully in their mother's bed, or if she was lying awake, listening for sounds that would never come again. Elena struck back the next morning with surgical precision. Mia was still in her hotel room, reviewing financial documents over room service coffee, when her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but the voice belonged to someone who sounded like they'd been expecting her call. Ms. Rodriguez? This is Jennifer Walsh from Channel 8 News. I'd like to get your comment on a story we're running tonight about inheritance disputes and family abandonment. Mia's blood went cold. I'm sorry, what? Your sister Elena reached out to us about what she calls a pattern of elder neglect in your family. She's provided some compelling evidence about your mother's final months and your absence during her illness. The reporter's voice carried the particular tone of someone who smelled blood in the water. We'd love to include your perspective on why you weren't present when your mother was dying. The phone felt slippery in Mia's suddenly sweating palm. I don't have any comment. Ms. Rodriguez, Elena has documentation showing your mother tried to reach you multiple times in her final months. Phone records, voicemails, even handwritten letters that were never answered. She also mentioned that you didn't even know about your mother's financial struggles or medical conditions. Don't you think the public has a right to know about these family dynamics, especially when there's a legal dispute over inheritance? Mia hung up without another word, her hands shaking as she immediately dialed James's number. She went to the media, she said when he answered. Elena called the news. They're running a story tonight about me abandoning Mom. James was quiet for a moment. Are you sure it was Elena who contacted them? The reporter said so. And James? They have details. Phone records, voicemails. Mia's voice cracked. What if she kept recordings of Mom trying to call me? What if she has proof of every time I was too busy, or too guilty, or too stubborn to pick up the phone? Mrs. Rodriguez, breathe. This is a deflection tactic. Elena knows we're investigating the will, so she's trying to shift the narrative. Make you look like the villain so people won't question her claim. But even as James spoke in his calm, professional tone, Mia could see exactly how this would play out. Elena, the devoted daughter who sacrificed everything to care for their ailing mother. Mia, the successful career woman who was too important to visit home, now swooping in after death to steal her sister's rightful inheritance. The optics were brutal, and Elena knew it. The story aired that evening. Mia watched from her hotel bed, David on speakerphone, as Elena's face filled the screen. Her sister had chosen her outfit carefully. A simple black dress that suggested mourning without being theatrical. Minimal makeup that emphasized her natural fragility. She looked like a woman who had lost everything and was now fighting for the only thing she had left. My mother died asking for Mia, Elena said, her voice breaking at exactly the right moment. She kept saying, maybe today she'll call. Maybe today she'll come home. But Mia was building her life in Seattle, and we weren't part of that life. The reporter nodded sympathetically. And now she's contesting your mother's will? My mother changed her will because she realized which daughter truly loved her. Which daughter was willing to sacrifice for family. Elena's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Mia can't accept that Mom finally saw her for who she really was. Jesus. David's voice came through the phone speaker. Mia, this is devastating. Mia finished. This is devastating. Because the worst part was that Elena wasn't entirely wrong. Mia had missed Carmen's birthday. had ignored calls when she was busy with work, had chosen her comfortable life in Seattle over the messy, painful reality of watching her mother age and decline. "Honey, you can't let her manipulate you like this," David said. "You're fighting her because you think she forged the will, not because you want to steal her inheritance." But Mia wondered if anyone watching the news would see it that way. Elena had crafted a narrative that was devastatingly simple. The good daughter versus the selfish daughter. The woman who stayed versus the woman who left. And narratives, Mia knew from her years in tech, were often more powerful than facts. Her phone buzzed with a text from Elena. "Hope you enjoyed the show. Drop the lawsuit. Or tomorrow I'll tell them about all the times Mom cried after your calls. When you do decide to call, that is." The threat was clear. Elena had more ammunition, and she wasn't afraid to use it. She was willing to destroy both their reputations, air every piece of family dysfunction, if it meant keeping the house. Mia stared at the text until the words blurred together. Somewhere in the distance, Portland's evening traffic hummed along the freeway. People heading home to families that probably weren't perfect, but also weren't at war with themselves on live television. She thought about James's question from earlier. Was she prepared for what this investigation might uncover? She'd thought he meant secrets about Elena, about the forged will, about what had really happened in Carmen's final months. She hadn't realized he might have been warning her about what she'd discover about herself. The call came at 3:17 a.m., 3 days after the news story aired. Mia jolted awake in her hotel bed, her phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand. Elena's name glowed on the screen, and for a moment, Mia considered letting it go to voicemail. But something in the timing, the desperate hour, the persistence of the ringing, made her answer. "Elena? She's here." Elena's voice was barely a whisper, raw with terror. "Mia, she's here in the house. I can hear her walking around upstairs." "Who's there?" "Elena, what are you talking about?" "Mom." The word came out as a sob. "She's angry, Mia. She knows what I did, and she's so angry." Mia sat up, suddenly fully awake. Through the phone, she could hear something that might have been footsteps, or might have been the old house settling, or might have been Elena's imagination fracturing under the weight of her own guilt. "Elena, listen to me. There's no one there. You're having a panic attack. You don't understand." Elena's breathing was rapid, shallow. "I can smell her perfume. That terrible white shoulders she always wore. And she keeps calling my name, but when I answer, she stops talking. Like she's disappointed in me, despite everything. The forged will, the media ambush, the years of resentment." Mia felt a stab of genuine concern for her sister. "Where's Tommy? Is he there with you?" "Tommy left." Elena's voice cracked. "He said I was getting crazy, that he couldn't watch me destroy myself. He knows, Mia. He knows what I did, and he can't look at me anymore." Mia closed her eyes, understanding flooding through her. Tommy knew about the forgery, had probably known from the beginning, and stayed silent out of love or fear, or both. But even love had its limits. "Elena, you need to call someone. A doctor, or... I found something today." Elena's voice shifted, becoming eerily calm. "In Mom's room, hidden behind her jewelry box. Letters she never sent. To you." Mia's blood went cold. "What kind of letters?" "Apologies, regrets." Elena's laugh was brittle, broken. "She wrote you dozens of them over the years. After every fight, every missed call, every birthday you forgot, she'd write these long letters telling you how sorry she was, how much she loved you, how she wished things could be different." The words hit like physical blows. Carmen, sitting alone in that big house, pouring her heart onto paper that Mia would never see. "Elena, why are you telling me this?" "Because she's here, and she won't stop looking at me with those disappointed eyes. Because Tommy was right. I am going crazy, and I can't make it stop." Elena's voice dropped to a whisper again. "Because I think she wants me to tell you the truth." "What truth?" There was a long pause, filled only with Elena's ragged breathing and the distant sounds of the old house. When she spoke again, her voice was small, broken, the voice of the little sister Mia remembered from childhood. I didn't forge the will, Mia. She really did change it. But not because she loved me more. Elena's sob echoed through the phone. She changed it because she was trying to make me into you. She kept saying I had to be strong, had to be independent, had to learn to take care of myself the way you had. The house was supposed to be my inheritance, but also my prison, my punishment for being weak. Mia felt the world tilt sideways. That doesn't make sense. If she really changed the will... The cash withdrawals weren't for medical bills, Elena interrupted. They were for me. For my debts, my rent, my rehab. She was bailing me out while telling me I had to learn to stand on my own. And every time she gave me money, she'd say Mia never needed this. Mia was strong enough to make her own way. The picture was becoming clearer now, and it was more complicated and painful than Mia had imagined. Carmen, trapped between her love for both daughters and her inability to express it in any healthy way. Elena, drowning in expectations she could never meet while being compared to a sister who had escaped. But Elena, if the will is real, the will is real, but I forged something else. Elena's voice was barely audible now. The letter. There was a letter with the will, Mia, a letter explaining why she was leaving you nothing. It was cruel, hateful, full of things she wrote when she was angry and medicated and not thinking clearly. Mia's heart stopped. What did you do with it? I burned it. Along with all the unsent letters to you, I thought I was protecting both of you, protecting her memory and protecting you from knowing how angry she was at the end. Elena's crying was audible now, raw and desperate. But she's here, Mia. She's here, and she knows I took away your chance to understand her, to forgive her. The line went quiet except for Elena's sobbing. Mia sat in her hotel room, staring out at the Portland skyline, trying to process what she'd just learned. The will was real, but incomplete. Carmen had left her nothing, but maybe not out of love for Elena, out of some twisted attempt at teaching both daughters lessons they didn't need to learn. Elena, she said finally, you need help, real help, and we need to talk, both of us, together about what Mom really wanted. She wants me to give you the house. Elena's voice was hollow now, exhausted. I can hear her saying it, over and over. Give Mia what belongs to her. The irony wasn't lost on Mia, that Elena's psychological breakdown might be the thing that finally brought them the truth they'd both been running from. We'll figure this out, Mia said, surprised to find she meant it. But first, you need to call 911. You need help tonight. As she hung up, Mia realized that the war between them had just shifted into something else entirely. Something that might, eventually, look like mercy. Tommy Nguyen walked into James Morrison's office the next afternoon, like a man approaching his own execution. His work clothes were clean but worn, his hands calloused from years of construction work, and his eyes carried the particular exhaustion of someone who hadn't slept in days. I need to tell you something about Elena, he said without preamble, settling into the chair across from James's desk. About what she did, what we did. Mia, who had been reviewing documents with James when Tommy arrived unannounced, felt her heart rate spike. After Elena's breakdown the night before, she'd expected this moment, but that didn't make it easier to face. Tommy's voice was steady but hollow as he began to speak. Elena didn't forge the will, that part was true, but she destroyed something else. A letter your mother wrote to go with it. A letter that explained everything. What did it say? Mia asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know. Your mother was angry, hurt. The letter was full of things about how you'd abandoned the family, how you'd chosen your career over her, how Elena was the only daughter who'd ever really loved her. Tommy's hands twisted in his lap, but it was also full of regret, apologies mixed in with the anger. She kept contradicting herself, like she couldn't decide if she was punishing you or trying to make you understand. James made notes on his legal pad, his expression carefully neutral. And Elena destroyed this letter, burned it in the backyard fire barrel, along with a stack of other letters your mother had written to Mia over the years but never sent. Tommy looked directly at Mia. Elena said she was protecting you from seeing how angry your mother was. But I think I think she was protecting herself, too. From having to admit that your mother's decision came from pain, not love. The weight of this revelation settled over the room like dust. Mia understood now why Elena had been so confident, so certain of her right to the house. She genuinely believed Carmen had chosen her out of love, because she'd erased all evidence to the contrary. There's more, Tommy continued, his voice growing quieter. The cash withdrawals from your mother's account, most of them went to Elena, for rent, for her rehab, for debts she'd racked up. Your mother was supporting her while telling her she needed to be independent. It was complicated. How long have you known about the destroyed letter? James asked. Since right after the funeral. Elena broke down and told me everything. She was crying, saying she'd done it to protect everyone, but I could see she was falling apart. Tommy's voice cracked slightly. I stayed because I loved her. Because I thought if I could help her through this, maybe she'd find a way to tell the truth. But instead, she just got deeper into the lie. Mia felt a strange mixture of anger and pity wash over her. Elena had robbed her of the chance to understand Carmen's complex feelings, but she'd also been drowning in the impossible position Carmen had put her in, being both the favored daughter and the financial burden, the one who stayed and the one who was constantly compared to the one who left. Mr. Nguyen, James said carefully, are you willing to provide a sworn statement about what you've just told us? Tommy nodded slowly. That's why I'm here. Elena's in the hospital now, psychiatric hold after last night. When I went to see her this morning, she begged me to tell you the truth. Said she couldn't carry it anymore. What happens now? Mia asked, looking between Tommy and James. Now we have a choice, James replied. We can use this information to contest the will's validity. Argue that without the accompanying letter, the will doesn't reflect your mother's complete intentions. Or we can work with Elena to find a solution that honors what your mother really wanted, underneath all the anger and dysfunction. Mia thought about Elena in the hospital, finally free of the weight of her deception, but facing an uncertain future. About Carmen, trapped by her own inability to express love without manipulation. About herself, finally understanding that her mother's silence hadn't been indifference. It had been a war between love and wounded pride. I want to see Elena, she said finally. Before we decide anything else, I need to talk to my sister. Tommy nodded, something like relief crossing his face. She's been asking for you. I think she's ready to stop running from what happened. As they prepared to leave James's office, Mia realized that the legal battle was essentially over. The real work, the work of understanding their family's broken dynamics and finding a way forward, was just beginning. The psychiatric ward at Providence Portland Medical Center smelled like disinfectant and despair. Mia walked down the sterile hallway beside a nurse whose smile was professionally kind, but worn thin by years of managing human breakdown. Through reinforced windows, she caught glimpses of other patients, some staring blankly at television screens, others pacing restlessly in common areas. Elena was in room 314, curled on her side in a narrow bed, staring at the wall. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the hospital gown and the absence of her usual careful makeup. When she heard Mia's footsteps, she turned slowly, and Mia was shocked by what she saw in her sister's eyes. Not the defiance or manipulation she'd expected, but something that looked almost like relief. You came, Elena said, her voice hoarse from crying or screaming or both. Of course I came. Mia settled into the plastic visitor's chair, noting how Elena's hands shook slightly where they rested on the thin blanket. How are you feeling? Elena's laugh was bitter, hollow. Like I've been hit by a truck. They have me on medication that makes everything feel fuzzy around the edges. She paused, studying Mia's face. Tommy told you, didn't he? About the letter. He did. Mia kept her voice gentle. Elena, why didn't you just show me the letter in the first place? Even if it was cruel. Even if Mom was angry. Because you would have given up. Elena's eyes filled with tears. You would have read those horrible things she wrote about you choosing your career over family, about how you broke her heart by leaving, and you would have walked away. You would have decided you deserved nothing. The accuracy of this hit Mia like a physical blow. Elena knew her well enough to understand that Mia's guilt would have made her accept Carmen's cruelest judgments as truth. But Elena, that wasn't your choice to make. Wasn't it? Elena sat up slowly, wincing as if the movement caused her pain. I was the one who held her hand while she wrote that letter. I was the one who watched her cry afterward, who heard her say, I didn't mean it, I didn't mean any of it, over and over. I was the one who had to live with knowing that our mother died angry at both of us. Angry at you for leaving, angry at me for staying. Mia felt tears burning behind her eyes. So you destroyed it to protect us both. I destroyed it because I was selfish. Elena's voice cracked. Because I wanted to believe that she chose me out of love instead of disappointment. Because I wanted the house to mean something beautiful, instead of being a monument to her bitterness. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 29 years of sisterhood hanging between them. Outside the window, Portland's gray sky threatened rain, and Mia could hear the distant sound of traffic, people going about their normal lives while hers fell apart and rebuilt itself in the space of a conversation. The detective wants to talk to me, Elena said suddenly, about the destroyed documents. James told them I burned evidence related to an estate dispute. Mia's stomach dropped. Elena, they could charge you with obstruction of justice, tampering with evidence, maybe fraud. Elena's voice was matter-of-fact, as if she were discussing the weather. I could go to prison, Mia. Real prison, not just this psychiatric vacation. We won't let that happen. The words came out before Mia fully understood what she was promising. I'll talk to James, we'll figure something out. Number. Elena's voice was stronger now, more like the sister Mia remembered from before all this started. I did this. I made choices, and now I have to live with the consequences. I spent years being Mom's victim, letting her guilt and manipulation control my life. I won't spend the rest of my life being yours. The statement hung in the air between them, and Mia realized that something fundamental had shifted in Elena during her breakdown. The desperate, manipulative woman who had ambushed her with the will was gone, replaced by someone who seemed to understand, perhaps for the first time, the weight of her own agency. What do you want, Elena? Really want underneath everything else? Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the gray Portland sky. I want to stop being afraid, she said finally. Afraid that I'm not good enough, that I don't deserve love unless I'm taking care of someone, that everyone I care about will eventually leave me. She looked directly at Mia. I want to stop punishing you for having the courage to leave when I didn't. And the house? Keep it, sell it, burn it down for all I care. Elena's smile was sad, but genuine. It was never really about the house, was it? It was about trying to hold on to something that proved we mattered to her. But we can't live in Mom's love, Mia, even if we could figure out what it looked like. As visiting hours ended and Mia prepared to leave, Elena reached out and caught her hand. Her grip was weak but insistent. There's one more thing, Elena said, about David. Mia's blood went cold. What about David? I called him, after the news story aired. I told him things. About your relationship with Mom, about how guilty you felt, about how this was all consuming you. Elena's eyes filled with shame. I was trying to get him to pressure you to drop the case. I thought if your marriage was at stake, you'd walk away. The betrayal hit fresh and sharp. Elena had tried to weaponize her marriage, the one relationship in Mia's life that had remained untainted by family dysfunction. What did you tell him? That you were obsessed. That you cared more about winning than about your future together. That you were choosing a fight with me over building a family with him. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. I'm sorry, Mia. I'm so sorry. As Mia walked back through the hospital corridors, Elena's words echoing in her mind. She realized that victory in their legal battle would be meaningless if it cost her everything else that mattered. The house, Carmen's approval, even justice. None of it would fill the hole that losing David would leave. She pulled out her phone as she reached the parking garage, David's number already highlighted on her screen. It was time to find out if some damage could still be undone, or if Elena's manipulation had finally found its mark in the one place Mia couldn't bear to lose. The phone rang once, twice. When David's voice came through the speaker, it sounded tired in a way that made Mia's heart sink. "Hey," he said simply. "I've been waiting for you to call." And Mia knew, with the terrible clarity that comes with having fought too many battles in too short a time, that the war with Elena might be ending, but the war for her marriage was just beginning. "I've been thinking about what Elena told you," David said through the phone, his voice carrying across the distance between Portland and Seattle like a bridge Mia wasn't sure she could cross. "About our marriage, about priorities, about what really matters." Mia sat in her rental car in the hospital parking lot, rain drumming against the windshield, in the familiar Pacific Northwest rhythm that had been the soundtrack to her childhood. "David, whatever she said to you, she said you were choosing a fight over our future, that you cared more about winning than about us starting a family." His voice was tired but not angry, which somehow made it worse. "And you know what, Mia? I think she might have been right." The words hit like a physical blow. That's not true. This was never about winning. It was about justice, about Mom's real intentions. Was it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've spent 3 weeks in Portland fighting with your sister instead of coming home to your husband. David paused, and Mia could hear him moving around their kitchen, probably making the chamomile tea he drank when he was stressed. "When was the last time we talked about anything except this lawsuit? When was the last time you asked about my day, or told me you missed me without it being followed by an update about Elena, or the will, or James Morrison?" Mia opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. He was right. Somewhere in the midst of fighting for her inheritance, she'd stopped fighting for her marriage. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "You're right. I got lost in all of this." "I know you did. And I understand why." David's voice softened. "Your family is complicated, and this situation is impossible. And you've been carrying guilt about your mother for 16 years. I get all of that. But Mia, I need to know, when this is over, whenever that might be, are you coming home to build a life with me? Or are you going to find another family crisis to disappear into?" The question hung in the air between them, sharp and unavoidable. Mia realized that David wasn't just asking about this particular situation. He was asking about their entire future, about whether she was capable of choosing their small, quiet life over the dramatic dysfunction that had always pulled her back into her family's orbit. "I want to come home," she said, and was surprised to find that she meant it completely. "David, I want to come home and start our family and never think about wills or inheritances or any of this again." "Then do it." His voice carried a note of challenge. "Drop the lawsuit. Let Elena keep the house. Come home and let's get pregnant and raise our kids somewhere they'll never have to worry about whether their parents love them enough." The simplicity of it was breathtaking. Elena had offered to give her the house. Tommy's testimony could probably invalidate the will entirely. But what would she really be winning? A crumbling Victorian that needed hundreds of thousands in repairs? The satisfaction of proving she'd been wronged? The hollow victory of punishment over reconciliation? "There's something else," Mia said. "Elena's facing criminal charges. For destroying the documents, she could go to prison." David was quiet for a long moment. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that maybe justice and mercy don't have to be the same thing." The next morning, Mia sat across from District Attorney Patricia Chen, no relation, despite the shared surname, in a government office that smelled like coffee and photocopier ink. James sat beside her, his expression carefully neutral as they discussed Elena's situation. "Your sister destroyed evidence related to an active estate dispute," DA Chen said, reviewing the file. "Even if her motives were protective rather than fraudulent, it's still a serious crime." "What if I don't want to press charges?" Mia asked. the state can still prosecute. Document destruction, obstruction of justice, these are crimes against the legal system, not just against you personally. DHN leaned back in her chair. However, victim impact statements carry significant weight in cases like this. If you're recommending rehabilitation over incarceration, I am. The certainty in Mia's voice surprised even her. My sister needs help, not punishment. She needs therapy and structure, and the chance to build a life that isn't defined by our family's dysfunction. James made a note on his legal pad. Mrs. Rodriguez, are you sure about this? Once we go down this path, there's no changing your mind later. Mia thought about Elena in the hospital bed, finally free of the lies that had been consuming her. About Carmen, dead and beyond justice or forgiveness. About David, waiting in Seattle for her to choose their future over her past. I'm sure. 2 weeks later, Mia found herself back in the crumbling Victorian on Elm Street, but this time she wasn't locked out. Elena, released from the hospital into an outpatient program, had given her the key with shaking hands and red-rimmed eyes. I can't live here anymore, Elena had said simply. Too many ghosts. Now Mia walked through the rooms of her childhood, seeing them clearly for the first time in years. The kitchen where Carmen had taught her to cook, but also where they'd had their worst fights. The living room where the family had gathered for holidays, but also where Carmen had delivered her harshest criticisms. The staircase where Mia had sat listening to her parents argue, learning that love and pain were often indistinguishable. Mrs. Dalton appeared at the back door as Mia stood in the kitchen, holding a casserole dish, and wearing the expression of someone who had been waiting for this moment. I brought you some food, the older woman said, settling the dish on the counter. Figured you might be too busy for cooking. Thank you. Mia accepted the offering gratefully. Mrs. Dalton, can I ask you something? In all the years you lived next door, did you ever see my family when we were actually happy? Mrs. Dalton was quiet for a moment, her eyes growing distant. Your mother used to garden, she said finally. Before your father died, before everything got so complicated. She'd be out there in the evenings, tending her tomatoes and roses, and you girls would help her. Elena would water everything twice because she was trying so hard to be useful, and you'd organize the tools because you liked things neat and orderly. Mia could almost see it. A version of her family that existed before grief and resentment had poisoned everything. Carmen would look at you both working in the dirt, getting your clothes filthy, and she'd smile, Mrs. Dalton continued. Really smile, not the careful one she wore for company. And she'd say, my girls are going to be stronger than I ever was. What happened to that family? Mia asked. Life happened. Loss happened. Your father died, and your mother never learned how to carry that grief without letting it change her into someone harder. Mrs. Dalton's voice was gentle, but matter-of-fact. But those happy moments weren't lies, dear. They were real. They just got buried under everything that came after. As Mrs. Dalton left, Mia continued her walk through the house, finally stopping in her mother's bedroom. Carmen's dresser still held her jewelry box, her perfume bottles, her reading glasses. But what caught Mia's attention was a small framed photo she'd never noticed before. Herself and Elena as children, maybe 8 and 3, both grinning at the camera with dirt-streaked faces and flowers in their hair. She picked up the photo, studying their young faces. They looked so sure of their love for each other, so certain that nothing could ever come between them. Maybe Mrs. Dalton was right. Maybe the love had been real, and everything else, the fighting, the resentment, the years of silence, had just been scar tissue, grown over old wounds. Mia pulled out her phone and dialed Elena's number. I've been thinking about the house, she said when her sister answered. About what to do with it. Mia, I told you, I don't want. What if we sold it together? Split the proceeds after we pay off Mom's debts. You could use your half for a fresh start, maybe that catering business you used to talk about. I could take my half and go home to David and try to build something good. Elena was quiet for so long that Mia wondered if the call had dropped. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with tears. You'd really do that? After everything I put you through? Elena, we're sisters. We're the only family we have left. Mia looked around the room that had held so much pain and, apparently, so much love. Maybe it's time we started acting like it. As they talked through the details, lawyers and realtors and the 1,000 small decisions that come with letting go, Mia felt something loosen in her chest. The weight she'd been carrying since Carmen's death, the guilt and anger and desperate need to prove something, was finally lifting. Outside, Portland's eternal rain had stopped, and weak sunlight was trying to break through the clouds. It wasn't much, but it was a start. 6 months later, Mia stood in the kitchen of the Victorian house on Elm Street, surrounded by cardboard boxes and the accumulated detritus of Carmen Rodriguez's 61 years of life. The real estate agent had been optimistic about the spring market, and they'd already had 2 serious inquiries despite the house's obvious need for renovation. Elena sat at the kitchen table, carefully wrapping their mother's good china in newspaper. Her hands were steadier now, the tremor that had marked her early weeks in therapy mostly gone. She looked healthier, too, not just physically, though she'd gained back some of the weight she'd lost during her breakdown, but in some indefinable way that suggested she was finally comfortable inhabiting her own skin. "Remember this?" Elena held up a chipped ceramic mug decorated with faded roses. "Mom's favorite. She had her morning coffee out of this thing every day for as long as I can remember." Mia took the mug, running her fingers over the familiar pattern. "She used to let me drink hot chocolate out of it on snow days. I thought it made everything taste better because it was hers." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, sorting through objects that held different memories for each of them. The process had been going on for weeks, deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to throw away. It was archaeological work, excavating layers of family history that had been buried under years of dysfunction and misunderstanding. "I found something yesterday," Elena said suddenly, reaching into her jacket pocket. She pulled out a small leather journal, its pages yellowed with age. It was hidden in Mom's closet, behind her shoeboxes. Mia's heart clenched. Another document, another revelation. "Elena, I don't know if I can handle any more surprises." "It's not bad," Elena said quickly. "At least, I don't think it is. It's complicated. Like everything else about her." She handed the journal to Mia. "It's a diary she kept during Dad's illness. I think she forgot about it after he died." Mia opened the journal carefully, her eyes scanning Carmen's careful handwriting. The entries were dated from the year before their father's death, when Mia was 16 and Elena was 11. March 15th. "Eduardo had a good day today. The doctors say the treatment is working, that we might have more time than we thought. I want to tell the girls, but I'm afraid to give them hope that might be taken away. Mia has been so angry lately, so distant. I know she's scared about her father, but I don't know how to reach her. Elena still believes everything will be fine. Sometimes I think ignorance really is bliss." April 2nd. Mia came home 2 hours past curfew again. "We fought. Terrible things were said on both sides. She accused me of caring more about rules than about her feelings. Maybe she's right. I'm so scared of losing control, of falling apart when my family needs me to be strong. But every time I try to talk to her, we end up screaming at each other." April 20th. Elena asked me today if Daddy is going to die. I told her no, that the doctors are going to make him better. I lied to my own child because I couldn't bear to see that trusting look disappear from her eyes. Mia knows I'm lying. She's old enough to understand what the doctors aren't saying directly. I think that's why she's so angry. Not at me, but at the situation, and I'm the only safe target. Mia looked up to find Elena watching her intently. "Keep reading," Elena said softly. "There's more." May 10th. I had coffee with Patricia Dalton today. She told me her daughter called from college, just to chat, to ask about her day. I was so jealous I could barely finish the conversation. When was the last time Mia and I had a real conversation? When did we stop being able to talk to each other without it becoming a battle? May 18th. I keep thinking about the kind of mother I wanted to be. Patient, understanding, someone my daughters could talk to about anything. Instead, I've become someone who criticizes and controls and pushes away the people I love most. Eduardo used to calm me down when I got like this. Without him, I don't know who I am anymore. June 3rd. Elena brought me flowers today from the garden. Dandelions, which aren't really flowers at all, but she was so proud of them. I put them in a vase on the kitchen table and told her they were beautiful. It was the first genuine smile I'd given either of my daughters in weeks. Why is it so much easier to love them when they're not challenging me? Mia's throat tightened as she read her mother's words. Here was the woman she'd always suspected existed beneath Carmen's harsh exterior. Someone who was struggling, who was aware of her own failures, who loved her daughters desperately but didn't know how to show it in healthy ways. She knew, Mia said quietly. She knew she was pushing us away, but she didn't know how to stop. Elena nodded. There's an entry from right after Dad died. She wrote about wanting to be different, wanting to repair her relationship with you. But then there are months of blank pages, and when she starts writing again, it's like she'd forgotten all of this self-awareness. Like grief made her forget who she wanted to be. Mia closed the journal, feeling the weight of all the conversations they'd never had, all the understanding that had come too late. Why are you showing me this now? Because I wanted you to know that the mother who wrote that bitter letter wasn't the whole truth about who she was. And neither was the mother who wrote these entries. Elena's voice was steady, but her eyes were bright with unshed tears. She was both of those people, and probably a dozen others we never got to see. Just like we're more than just the sisters who fought over this house. They were interrupted by a knock at the front door. Elena went to answer it, returning a moment later with Mrs. Dalton, who was carrying a covered dish and wearing the expression of someone with something important to say. I hope I'm not interrupting, Mrs. Dalton said, settling the dish on the counter. I brought you some soup for lunch, but I also wanted to talk to you both before the house sells. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small wrapped package. Your mother asked me to give this to you after she died. Both of you, together. She made me promise to wait until you were getting along again. Mia and Elena exchanged glances. Even in death, Carmen had been orchestrating their lives, planning for contingencies they couldn't have imagined. Elena unwrapped the package carefully, revealing a small wooden box that Mia recognized from Carmen's dresser. Inside were two identical gold chains, each holding a small pendant in the shape of a rose. There was also a note, in Carmen's handwriting. For my daughters. You were both my roses, even when I forgot how to tend the garden properly. Wear these and remember that love doesn't always look like what we expect it to. Mama. Mia felt tears streaming down her face as Elena fastened the chain around her neck. The pendant was warm against her skin, and for the first time since Carmen's death, she felt like her mother was truly with her. She planned this, Elena said, touching her own pendant. She knew we'd fight over the house, and she knew we'd eventually have to find our way back to each other. Mrs. Dalton smiled. Your mother was many things, girls, but she was never stupid. She knew her daughters better than you knew yourselves. As they sat around the kitchen table, sharing Mrs. Dalton's soup and stories about Carmen that none of them had ever told before, Mia realized that this was what healing looked like. Not dramatic revelations or legal victories, but quiet moments of understanding, the slow work of rebuilding trust one conversation at a time. The house would sell, and they would both move forward into different lives. But they would do it as sisters, carrying their mother's complicated legacy and their own hard-won wisdom into whatever came next. The house sold on a Tuesday in late October, exactly 1 year after Carmen's death. Mia stood on the front porch one last time, keys in hand, watching the new owners, a young couple with twin toddlers, measure the porch for a safety gate. Their excitement was infectious, their plans ambitious and optimistic, in the way that only comes with not yet knowing how much love and work it takes to turn a house into a home. They'll be happy here, Elena said, joining her on the porch steps. She was wearing the rose pendant Carmen had left them, the gold catching the autumn sunlight. Did you see how the little boy ran straight to the reading nook? Just like you used to do. Mia smiled, remembering herself at 4 years old, hiding behind the built-in bookshelf with picture books and animal crackers. And the girl went right to the kitchen, just like you. She's going to drive her mother crazy trying to help with everything. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Elena's voice was thoughtful. Maybe some of us are meant to be helpers, even if we don't always get it right. They walked to Elena's car, a sensible used Honda she'd bought with her first paycheck from the catering company she'd started with her half of the inheritance money. Elena's empanadas had begun as a food truck serving construction sites, but word of mouth had led to catering contracts and a small storefront in southeast Portland. It wasn't glamorous work, but Elena seemed to thrive on the early mornings and demanding customers, the immediate satisfaction of feeding people well. "Are you nervous?" Elena asked as they drove toward the cemetery. "About tonight, I mean." Mia touched her slightly rounded belly, still small enough that strangers wouldn't notice, but obvious enough that David had started talking to it when he thought she wasn't listening. Terrified, but good terrified, if that makes sense. It does. Elena pulled into the parking lot at Mount Calvary Cemetery, where Carmen and their father rested side by side under a simple granite headstone. "I was terrified when I opened the catering business, but it was the first time in my life I'd been scared of something I actually wanted instead of something I was trying to avoid." They walked in comfortable silence to their parents' grave, carrying the small bouquet of roses Elena had insisted on bringing. The headstone was simple: Eduardo and Carmen Rodriguez, with dates and a brief inscription in Spanish that translated to quote 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 quote. It said nothing about the complexity of their marriage, the struggles with their daughters, the way grief had nearly destroyed what remained of their family. "I used to come here and try to apologize," Elena said, kneeling to place the flowers. "For the forged letter, for all the lying, for not being the daughter she wanted me to be. But my therapist says that's not what this place is for." "What is it for, then?" "Remembering, accepting, letting go." Elena stood and brushed dirt from her knees. "And maybe saying thank you for the parts of her that were good, even if they got lost sometimes." Mia found herself thinking about the diary entries, about Carmen's desperate wish to be a different kind of mother. "I think she would have loved seeing us here together, not fighting, not competing, just being sisters. She would have loved knowing about the baby," Elena added. "Even if she would have had opinions about everything from your prenatal vitamins to your choice of crib." They both laughed, and it felt strange but right to be laughing at their mother's grave. Carmen had been many things: controlling, critical, wounded, loving, but she had never been someone who inspired reverent silence. She had been too loud, too passionate, too present even in her absence. 2 hours later, they were back in Portland, sitting around the dining room table in Elena's small apartment above her catering shop. Mrs. Dalton was there, wearing her best sweater and looking pleased to be included in what Elena had insisted on calling the first annual Rodriguez family dinner. David had driven down from Seattle, and Tommy had surprised everyone by showing up with a bottle of wine and an awkward but genuine apology for his role in the deception. The dinner was simple. Elena's empanadas, of course, along with her mother's rice and beans recipe and a salad that David had contributed to feel useful. But the conversation was rich, full of stories and laughter and the kind of gentle teasing that families engage in when they actually like each other. "Tell me again about the food truck," Mrs. Dalton said, accepting a second helping of empanadas. "A mobile restaurant." "What a clever idea." "It's not really mobile anymore," Elena said. "I'm thinking about opening a second location, maybe something bigger. Tommy's been helping me look at real estate." Tommy, who had been quietly nursing his wine and listening to the conversation, smiled shyly. "She's got good instincts for business. Better than she thinks." Mia watched the easy interaction between Elena and Tommy, noting how different their dynamic was now from the desperate codependency she'd witnessed during the will crisis. Elena had learned to want things for herself, instead of just trying to be what other people needed. Tommy had learned to support her ambitions, instead of just managing her crises. "What about you two?" Elena asked, nodding toward Mia and David. "Any plans beyond the baby?" David reached over and squeezed Mia's hand. "We're thinking about looking for a house, something with a yard, maybe room for Elena to visit when she wants to escape the city." "I'd like that," Elena said, and Mia could tell she meant it. "I'd like to be the kind of aunt who teaches your kids how to cook and tells them embarrassing stories about their mother. Just don't teach them to forge documents," Mia said, and was surprised when everyone laughed, including Elena. "Too soon?" Elena asked. "About 6 months too soon," Mia replied. But we'll get there. As the evening wound down and their guests prepared to leave, Elena pulled Mia aside in the kitchen. I have something for you, she said, reaching into a drawer and pulling out a small wrapped package. For the baby. Inside was a tiny silver rattle, engraved with the words, Rodriguez family, new generation, and the date. Elena, it's beautiful. But how did you know the exact date? Elena smiled. David might have called me last week to ask what Mom's middle name was. He wanted to make sure you had all the family names to choose from. Mia felt tears threatening, not from sadness but from the overwhelming realization that she had somehow, against all odds, ended up with exactly the family she'd always wanted. Not perfect, not undamaged, but real and chosen and committed to doing better than the generation before. Thank you, she said, hugging her sister tightly. For everything. For fighting with me, for making up with me, for becoming someone I'm proud to call family. Thank you for not giving up on us, Elena replied. For seeing who I could be even when I couldn't see it myself. As Mia and David drove back to Seattle that night, Mia found herself thinking about the house they'd left behind, now belonging to a new family who would fill it with different memories. She thought about Carmen and Eduardo, whose love had been imperfect but real. She thought about Elena, building a life based on her own dreams instead of other people's expectations. Most of all, she thought about the future, uncertain but full of possibility, grounded in the hard-won understanding that family isn't something you're born into, but something you choose to build, one conversation and one act of forgiveness at a time. The baby kicked as they crossed the Columbia River, and Mia smiled, already imagining the stories she would tell her child about the complicated, beautiful, thoroughly human family they were being born into. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.